Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back, everybody. I used to think that counseling and psychology and all those sort of things where you sit down and you discuss what's going on in your life was with some stranger or someone that you were paying to listen to you was a bunch of hooey. I used to think just pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and fix your own damn problems. You don't need to go running off to someone to discuss them and just wallow about in them. Well, I found out I was wrong. And I wound up having to take a course on counseling myself, or how to help people deal with their problems, because it's something that I had volunteered to do myself in the community. And I found a new light and a new breath for counseling itself. And I'm going to introduce you to Rebecca Helps, and she is a counselor that sits and listens to you, no judgments, and she does specialize in what maybe the courts call anger management, and a few other things such as child and family counseling, couples therapy, and individual counseling. But when you listen to her view on what it is she does for people and how she grew up, it might change your mind if you're a skeptic about counseling to one who might actually start to believe in it like I do now. I think that whenever we have a bump in the road, that reaching out for a coach or a counselor is probably the way to go. So this is what Rebecca Helps has to say about herself. I grew up thinking people didn't want me around and that I was fundamentally flawed. I developed walls to protect myself by keeping people at bay. People can't reject you if you don't let them get close. This left me alone, exhausted, anxious, depressed, and afraid. I knew that I had to do something, and taking a leap of faith to heal myself, I started a journey to become a counselor. Having broken down my walls and healed my wounds, I wanted to help others to do the same, to find their way out of the dark and lonely places and into a more friendly world. So let's welcome Rebecca to our show. So, welcome to the show, Rebecca. It's great meeting you. We met through a networking meeting, and I think we're becoming fast friends. So I was telling everybody in your introduction about, I read your statement on your website, helpscounseling.com, I think it is, right?
Correct, helpscounseling.com.
Yeah. So tell us more about that story and why you decided to put that particular slice of your life on the website?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm going to start with why I put it there. And the reason I put it there and kind of opened up and kind of shared so much about myself is because I want people to know that they're not the only ones going through this. You know, we don't talk a lot about our struggles on like a real vulnerable level. And so we often think I'm the only one that feels like I'm not wanted, or that I'm not good enough, or that I don't belong. And I want people to know that they're not alone in that, and that there is help, that you can get to a point where you no longer feel that way. So for me, my story started in childhood with a lot of different things going on, but a lot of it that shaped it was a severe learning difference of dyslexia. I was quite dyslexic, and I also had a speech impediment. And so I think that really made me different than everybody else in my class. And on top of it, I was also very smart. I'm like above average in intelligence in regards to like figuring things out really quickly. I can see patterns and systems. And so, you know, I didn't really fit in anywhere. Because how do you spend half your day in enrichment, half your day in learning assistance, and then expect to fit in with your class? It doesn't really work somehow.
Yeah,
So growing up feeling like I didn't belong, that I wasn't wanted, and on top of that, I needed to prove that I was the smartest person in the room in order to stay in the room. Because at some point, my school was talking about sending me to the special school in the district for the kids that couldn't make it in the mainstream school system. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a lot of fear about, you know, now not only am I like separated in the school, but I'm going to be like totally separated from society in a way. So that's kind of like the basis of where I started off with a lot of this stuff. And there's other stuff going on. But basically, as I grow up, you know, I have a lot of anxiety and depression and not really understanding where it comes from, because nothing in the present was the problem. It was all trauma from the past carrying forward. And I got to a point where I realized that my life wasn't what I wanted it to be. I was doing a job that I enjoyed. I was working from home, but I wasn't energized. I was taking naps in the afternoon because I was so tired I couldn't make it through the day. I had no friends, no social life. I wasn't doing any of my hobbies or interests that I love, which are connected a lot to the outdoors, because it's hard to do those when you don't have any energy. And it's kind of like something needs to change. I've changed jobs. I've changed where I lived. None of those had solved the problem. And so finally it's like, well, I guess I'm the one who needs to change. So I started looking for help to figure out how I could do that. You know, how could I figure out what was wrong with me and work on changing it?
Yeah. You know, a lot of that I can relate to. One of the reasons why I wound up in radio for journalism instead of at a newspaper is because I'm extremely dyslexic. If you ever read an elongated email from me, you'll be like, there's words missing here. And it's stuff like that. But in the science world, in science and math, is like the recognition of patterns and being able to see math as another language and things like that. I was great at, right? So I could kind of relate to where you're going with that. And in the gifted class for math and science and in languages, I was in the like the lowest of the low. You know.
There was an article that came out this summer about research done on the evolutionary purpose of dyslexia. And I've actually shared it with a number of my clients who might have dyslexia also, or maybe they're parents of children. Because for so long, when we're different like that, well, different is wrong. But now we're actually starting to look at it as, well, maybe difference has a purpose. And that's what I actually do a lot as a counselor, is how can we look at who you are and the purpose of what you're doing. Maybe the outcome isn't what you want, right? Maybe there's unintended consequences to your behavior, but maybe there is a purpose to your behavior, just as there is a purpose to dyslexic learners. There's not something wrong with dyslexic learners. They're an important part of evolution, because they're the ones who can see the world differently and, don't just keep doing what everybody else is doing. They go out and figure out a different way to do it. And I think there's a really important lesson in that, just because other people tell us that there's something wrong with us doesn't mean there is. For so many of my clients, they're feeling like they're not good enough, or that they're not smart enough, or they're not capable enough. And it's because they believe other people have that perception of them. But it doesn't matter what other people's perception is, because other people's perception doesn't know the truth of you. Just as other people judging our behavior doesn't make sense, because other people don't know what's in our heart, right? The only way to know what's in our heart is if we were to tell people, and most people don't wait around to ask before they jump to conclusions and judge others.
Right. So what was that breakthrough moment for you that you realized that, hey, I'm a worthy person and I deserve to be heard?
Well, my counselor training program was a 3-year program. It started off with everybody who does the program needs to do a weekend workshop called The Awakening. And then the first year, your life and you are the curriculum. So I really had to look at my own wounds and what was going on. So there were, for me, so many little breakthrough moments. One that really sticks out for me is we would do this weekend called Alter Ego Weekend. And before that, our classmates would go around, and for each person, they would describe how they see us, like our characteristics. And mine were things like uptight, rigid, rigid, uptight, just kind of like, not present and in the moment. So for alter ego, I had to come as Cindy, right, from Three's Company, the blonde one, and just be ditzy blonde. And that was so hard for me to let loose and to be funny, because I needed to be serious so that people wouldn't judge me and exclude me. And so now I was being asked to be funny and silly and, a bit dim. And that weekend really, I think, cracked open for me that it was okay to start to shift how I showed up in the world. And since then, I include humor so much in my life. I had a client the other day where we were laughing in session, and she made a comment about, all adults are old and boring, and she doesn't want to be that way. And I go, well, you're with a counselor who laughs with you in session about some really tragic things sometimes. It's like you've picked a counselor who is the opposite, I think, of old and boring. And she's like, oh, yeah, right. And it's like, so we don't have to be what we think we need to be, right? We don't have to be boring. We don't have to be humorless. We don't have to be any of these things that we think is needed. We can be whatever we want to be.
All right, that makes sense. Of course, sometimes one industry's jokes don't always translate to another industry's jokes, but that's another topic. But because you shared a joke with me earlier about your calendar that you're going on vacation, and of course you say you're going on vacation and your calendar fills up for that week, and I kind of I kind of got the joke, but I didn't get it as a joke.
Well, here's the thing. Most people don't understand my jokes. I think they're hilarious, but I usually have to end up explaining them to people. And then I think that that's extra hilarious that my jokes always have to be explained. So maybe they're not really jokes.
Yeah, but it's what makes you, because I think you're fun as a person. I've only met you, what is this, a handful of times, and every time I've talked to you, I'm like, hey, she's a really fun person. Of course, they added into the fact that you're entertaining, added into the fact that I said I gotta have you on the podcast.
Right,
but how does
it's like I feel that I'm.
How does that translate to you being more confident in you so that you can help more people?
So I'm more authentic. I'm more myself. I'm not worried about what other people think. I can't remember what year in my counselor training program, but I was having some like anxiety about, am I going to be able to do this? Because I found that in class, like to get comfortable, to be able to like open up to people, I might kick off my shoes and sit cross-legged on the couch or on the chair. And I'm like, but counselors aren't allowed to do that, right? And one of my teachers said, well, why not? And I'm like, okay. And sure enough, that's what I do. Often clients come in, they're settling in, maybe even partway through the session, I'll be like, I'm just going to kick off my shoes. Sometimes I sit cross-legged on the couch. Sometimes my feet are up on the table. I'm just very relaxed in the session. I invite them to kick off their shoes. I invite them to stand on the furniture. It's just like we can be ourselves. We don't need to be something else. We can be what we need to be in the moment to feel comfortable, regardless of whether it's a counseling session, or we're at home watching TV.
Well, if I need, of course, now I had to, because we're becoming friends, so I can't have you as a counselor. But that's one of the rules. You don't want to counsel your own friends. It's generally a bad idea, right? But you would be the kind of person I would look for. Relaxed, willing to kick your shoes off because it. I guess the question to that is, do you find that in your clients that you're kind of mirroring your clients to help them feel more comfortable, especially if you're allowing yourself to kick your shoes off, sit on the couch with your legs crossed or something?
So I'm not mirroring them because most people don't feel comfortable doing that, right? Like out at an appointment. So what I'm doing is I'm teaching them, because every moment of the day, we're all teachers. We're all teaching people around us. And so in the counseling session, I am definitely a teacher. And so I'm teaching them that it is okay to let down your hair. Although I normally put mine up in a ponytail even during the session, but you can let down your hair, you can kick off your shoes, you can relax, you can sit cross-legged, you can find a way to be comfortable. Because ultimately, counseling, you're going to be able to get a lot further in your counseling if you feel comfortable. And that's one of the main things with counseling, is you need to feel comfortable with the counselor. And if you don't, then you should move on and find another counselor. I think people sometimes stay too long because they feel like an obligation, maybe, that they started with this counselor, so they're supposed to stick to them. Because there are some people that jump around from counselors too much because maybe they have attachment issues. So there is a balance there. But at the end of the day, you have to feel like, is this somebody I can talk to? Yeah. Is this somebody I feel can hold space for me, that I feel safe being myself around them?
Yeah, you just used the term that I like to use, hold space. And a few years ago, I had a friend of mine, one of my best friends ever, that we could talk about anything, argue about anything, and get into the kind of arguments like, "Oh, you're a bloody idiot, and you don't know what that blank you're talking about," kind of arguments, and then wake up the next day, call and say, "Hey, how the hell are you?" It's like almost as though nothing ever, we hadn't had to argue about something the day before, because we were always ready, fresh for the next new day, and grateful to have this person in my life. She had an accident and she passed away, and I had a hard time dealing with it, and I wound up dealing with it with a counselor, and he was so relaxed and easygoing about everything that I was able to just, I wouldn't say that he was a friend, because he didn't become a friend, but I was that comfortable, right? That I could just like let my feelings fall out. I didn't have to worry about the judgment of why my feelings for this person were what they were, right? So, yeah. Go ahead.
You know, and that's a worry people have, whether it's in counseling or the rest of our day, our lives, is always this worry about judgment. I'm going to be judged, right? I shouldn't do this because I'm going to be judged. And counseling is a place where you should never feel judged, right? Counseling should always be that safe place. And if you're feeling judged, then it's not the right counselor for you.
Right. And that makes perfect sense. So, let's move on, because your story about dyslexia, I love the research that you actually did into it, and please email it to me and share, so we can maybe we can write an article about it together or something. I don't know, but
or maybe you can even include a link to the article, because I'm sure other people might be interested in it too, because dyslexia isn't uncommon. We just don't talk about it because there's something wrong with it.
Yeah. See, neurodiversity, we need to have a whole segment just about that. But how do you decide if you're going to work with someone or if you're going to pass them on? Because helps counseling has what do you got, like 12 or 15?
No, we have about
working with you.
Yeah, we have about 6 or 7 right now. The number fluctuates. So sometimes people go to the website and they read the bios and they connect with somebody. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons I try to make sure my counselors all have more of a personal story instead of a bio which just says, I became a counselor because I like to help people. Well, that should be unspoken. If you're going to be a counselor, it should be because you like to help people. You don't need to say that. Maybe say a little bit more about where liking to help people comes from. So sometimes people self-select based on the bio. And when I talk to them directly, sometimes it's often a gut feeling, right? Or people tell me something about their story, and I'll be like, I know that counselor has worked through that. Because part of what I was trained as a counselor is you can't help people unless you've overcome that issue yourself. So if you're codependent with a parent, you can't help a client to let go of being codependent with a parent unless you've gone through and have worked through that and are no longer codependent with your parent. So hearing the person's story, you can kind of get a sense of which counselor is going to be the right fit for them. And then I usually recommend it. Some people go straight into a session with a counselor and it works out great. Some people want to do a consult first too, like a free 20-minute consult, and that's fine also. So again, it comes back to feeling comfortable with the counselor.
Right. Right. So then that makes sense to have as much of your personality show up in your bio as possible, and as much of your authentic story. Because when I read your bio, I was like, oh, it's like I know exactly how that felt, and so it was well written that way also. And for a person who is dyslexic, it was also easy for me to read out into the intro also. I didn't stumble nearly as much as I usually do. But we won't tell people that part. So well done on that. How did you come to want to bring other counselors together in a system like helps counseling? How did you get to that point?
Well, it's always been my dream to be an entrepreneur. I've read so many books. I remember reading the E-Myth, and it started off talking about becoming an entrepreneur by building on your trade. And my brother did that. He's a painter, and he built a painting company. I don't really have a trade. I tried to do it before off of my computer business analyst skills, but I didn't get very far. So, when I was deciding to become a counselor, in the back of my head, it was like, this is my trade. This is what's going to help me build that business and be an entrepreneur. And I started off wanting to maximize my office to get the most out of it. Like if I'm renting it for 7 days a week for for the whole month, I'm not using it all the time, so why not bring somebody else in to share the room and make some money off of that. And I do that, but what I have found from my model, which is different than other counselors, is let's have counselors all over the Lower Mainland that are listed underneath the Helps Counselling website. So that way we're working together and not competing against each other. We have shared advertising, we have the shared website, and it really helps counselors that are especially new to the business to come in and have a team and be supported and to learn how to grow their practice while not having to worry about all of the business running things. And they can focus on just getting some coaching and some support to connect better with their clients. And so I like to help counselors too, because I like to help people. And if it helps me to reach my dream of being an entrepreneur and building a business, then it's a triple win. A win for me, a win for counselors, and a win for the clients.
Yeah, because I did notice that there's a variety of areas, topics, however you want to put it, in how each of the counselors actually help people. So it isn't a one size fits all sort of thing. So you if I'm reading this correctly, that of course the client self picks who they want to work with based on the story, because this is something that all of us entrepreneurs face. How do you figure if that person isn't really fitting in with you, and you need to pass them on to someone else?
If the client isn't fitting in, and
they're not fitting in with you specifically, and you want to pass them on to the next person. How does that work?
Yeah,
if it hasn't.
So, it hasn't really happened. I'm trying to think. I can't think of any exact examples, but I could see it where, we call it projection, where you're like projecting something onto the other person. So if somebody is not connecting with me, maybe because I remind them of a female figure from their childhood who was abusive, so maybe they can't quite feel comfortable with me, not because of anything I'm doing or not doing, but because of what they're struggling with. And so that would be like an example of when it might be appropriate to pass them on to somebody else. And it could also be an opportunity to really help them work through that by helping them to take off the projection. So everything's a case-by-case, unique situation. And it really depends on where the client is at and what they feel is right for them. So I'd only refer a client on if I really feel like I'm not able to help them. Because the one thing that I hear from clients, which they were seeing a counselor, and I remember one client told me their counselor told them they couldn't help them anymore and was going to stop seeing them. And it was a client who didn't talk very much during sessions. And so for counselors, that of course can be very anxiety provoking if you have a client who isn't talking. But if the client isn't talking, it's our job as the counselor to keep working on creating a space that is right for the client. So if the client isn't talking, I'm not going to say, well, I can't help you and I need to pass you on to another counselor, because that could very well make the person feel very rejected and that they're not doing something right. Instead, I'm going to switch up how I approach it. And I might switch more to psychoeducation, so psychology education, and just talk with them and explain stuff. And often then that helps too, right? Because at least they're still learning something. And often people who aren't saying anything are really taking it in and are hearing it, and it's like processing in their brain. And so they're still learning and growing by simply having somebody take the time to explain and educate them on why they're feeling the way they're feeling. Or not why, but like, where those feelings come from or how they develop.
That kind of makes sense. So, you have a process of where you're always kind of teaching somebody something new, either about them or about what's going on around them.
Yeah. And I remember one client who came to me for anger management, and when I do anger management, I follow this book and I teach like anger management skills and knowledge, but I try to talk and incorporate counseling to get to the root of the problem. Where's the anger coming from? Can we resolve the underlying beliefs that are getting in the way? And this was a client who didn't talk very much, just hadn't grown up talking about feelings or thoughts or anything like that. So we just really focused on the education part and talking about different scenarios and how this stuff comes up and what's going on. And every week he would come back and tell me how much he got out of it and what changes he had started to make in his life and how he was seeing a difference. And it was like, so it doesn't actually always matter what the client is saying. It matters what the client is getting out of it.
Okay. So what is it that you hope the client actually gets out of it?
I hope the client gets out of it that they're allowed to shift their perceptions and their beliefs. That just because somebody has told them something is true doesn't mean it is. We're all, well, not all, but it's like we grow up hearing either directly or indirectly, that we're not good enough, or we're not lovable, or that we're not capable. And we take that as the truth. And yet, why is that any more the truth than the belief that I am lovable, and that I am capable, and that I am good enough, and I have value? So helping them to, shift their thinking from accepting that just because somebody else tells you something is true doesn't mean it's true, and you can actually choose to believe something different. So instead of choosing to believe you're not good enough, you can choose to believe that you are.
Okay. Now, because that's a real deep dive into how you get somebody to start to see that so they can choose to see that they are worthy and a worthwhile, valued human being in our society.
Yeah, I wish I could do it in one session, but it usually takes quite a few to get to that point.
Yeah.
And we get stuck, believing that we're not good enough or not capable, because it's a way to protect ourselves. If somebody bigger than us or in authority thinks we don't have value, right? If we try to prove different to them, they'll figuratively or perhaps literally beat us down. So we start to adopt the beliefs of our abusers as a form of protection. And so to be able to shift our beliefs, we have to first work on understanding that we're safe, and that we're not back in grade 5 with that teacher who really should not have been a kindergarten teacher telling us that we're worthless, or not back with that parent who, although they love us, really do not have parenting skills and unfortunately conveyed to us that we didn't have value. So it's helping people come out of the past to be in the present and to build safety in the present.
And safety in the present, that's something that we all I don't think that there's a person or being out there that doesn't want that safety right in their present life, So
yeah, but it's understanding the difference between like a real threat and a perceived threat, because a lot of us are living with anxiety or anger because we're seeing threats and danger all around us.
Mm-hmm.
But those threats are just perceptions. So this morning I was out walking my dog, and there's a bit of a forest path, and I've walked down this I don't know how many times, but I looked down just to make sure there weren't any dogs off the leash, because I didn't want it to be a problem with my dog. And I see something, and I'm like, what is that? Is that a branch? No? Yeah, no, that's just some leaves. Anyways, somehow my brain did identify it was a coyote, but its fur so blended in with the leaves, it was so hard to see. So there's an actual potential threat, right?
Real threat.
So, yeah. Like, there's a coyote. I have a big dog, so I'm not that worried about it. But there's a threat. So now I'm going to just switch and keep on the city block and walk that way. Where I have a neighbor who doesn't want to walk down any of the forest paths around here because she's worried about bears. And there are a lot of bears where I live, but the reality is that we don't run into them all the time. So, but when you do see the bear or coyote, then you take action versus assuming that you're going to see a bear and a coyote and therefore you're not safe. And therefore you're taking actions to protect yourself, which in reality just limit the life you get to live. Because if I was always worried about bears and coyotes, I would never get to go out and enjoy this beautiful forested area.
Right. I totally get that, because our forested area around where we live, here in of course another part of the Lower Mainland, I would say, not to, within about 100 meters of where our house sits, there is an actual coyote den. Well, that's not going to stop me from going out, because you know what? The coyote has to do the same things I have to do. It has to eat. It has to sleep, and it has to rest. And their society also, they have a society, and in which case they spend time together. And it doesn't mean that they're always out hunting. It means that there's other things that coyote is going to want to do. So I don't know that I'm going to step out the door and he's hunting. So I'm going to assume that he's not. So I'm going to go out the door. I'm going to have fun myself, and in the same neighborhood, because he's my neighbor, you know. And
but if you open up the door and see the coyote actually on your doormat, then maybe close the door and wait and go out after he's left.
Right. Exactly. Because it's like, okay, he's probably on my doorstep because, you know, coyotes tend to want to go through our trash and our garbage to look for food. So, he's hungry. Close the door back, and I don't have to worry about him being hungry until... And he'll eventually either find food and carry it off, or he won't find food and he'll walk off. Either way, eventually it's going to leave, right? So we don't need to be in constant fear. Is the whole point, right?
And it's about evaluating the moment and the reality of what's actually happening, right? The actual tangible facts of the moment versus the perceived threats that could be out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, because I know I did this thing about the evolution of the human brain, and when we created urban areas, that we started creating these more perceived threats than actual threats. Early man actually had to deal with the wolf, the tiger, all that sort of stuff, being at his cave door. And when we have an urban area, we don't really have to deal with that, and we started in our minds creating these perceived threats, but there's no real basis to them. So how do you teach a person that there's no basis to what they perceive to be a threat, instead of where there is, like the example of the coyote, that's a real threat? How do you teach a person the difference?
Well, it's understanding where the threat is coming from. It's almost like when somebody's angry or anxious, and I always consider angry and anxious as two sides of the same coin. They're so interconnected. It just shows up as anger for some people and anxiety for the others. But if you think of it as an iceberg, and 10% is above the surface, and 90% of the iceberg is below. So when we're anxious or angry, we got to address the 10% above the surface, and then let's look at what's really driving up our adrenaline and cortisol and our feelings of anger and anxiety, which is at 90% below, which is coming from the past. And so it's helping people to, again, distinguish between the past and the present.
Okay. Wow. So we do need to actually start wrapping up, and because we're getting close to the end of the show here. One last question. What is it that that you want when somebody works with you and you're ready to I don't know, how do you put that? Discharge them, or say, hey, you know what? You're healed to a point that you don't need to come see me anymore, but feel free to come back when you need to heal again. What is that goal? How do you know that they are healed? How do you know when it's time to let them go and discharge them?
Yeah, well, first of all, people aren't broken, so maybe healing isn't the right word.
I can't really figure out the right word, but I'm hoping that you understand what I mean.
Yeah. So the best way is to look at it with the onion analogy, right? Mm-hmm. We all have layers of understanding of ourselves that we need to work through. And so sometimes those come off in thin slices, sometimes they come off in big chunks as we peel back the onion. And sometimes we need to just take a break from it because we've done enough work and we're feeling stable and good where we're at. And so we take a break from our self-discovery exploration that we're on, and maybe we do it just more on our own. So when working with a client, one of the first things I always do is set goals. And one of the goals is always a feeling goal. What do you want to feel more of in your life? Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people, that's happy, joy, content, free, at peace. And so, as things start to shift, right, and we start to get to that point where they're starting to feel more joy and happiness and peace in their life, then we'll start to talk about, maybe it's time to cut back on appointments. Maybe instead of coming once a week, you come twice every 2 weeks, and then every month. And really, it's up to the client in the end to decide when's the right time for them. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes people just need a break too from going deep on themselves. It can be exhausting in a different way to work on yourself emotionally. And sometimes it's like we do all this work, which is great, and we get so much out of it. And at the same time, sometimes we just want to be able to go play and have fun and not have to think about all the deeper layers and meanings of things for a while. And so it's just time to take a break from our self-exploration journey.
I see. Kind of makes sense. What are the best ways to find you and work with you? I know we mentioned helpscounselling.com. What other ways do we have to get a hold of you and work with you? Or your team?
Well, you can so you can contact us through helpscounselling.com. My phone number's on the website. My email's there. So reach out. I work with, and my team works with individuals, couples, families. Not all of us, but some of us work with children. And then I'm also branching into working with companies. I really believe that we need to bring mental health more into the workplace because that's where we spend the majority of our time with most of our interactions and relationships with a variety of people. And so we need to actually do more in the workplace to foster mental health so that we can have healthier work environments. Because when we have healthier work environments, we have more productive and profitable work environments. So everybody benefits. So if you want to work with me on an individual level, great. And if you're liking what you're hearing and think it could benefit your company, I'd love to work with you and your company.
Cool. Awesome. So thanks for joining us today. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We hope that you do actually go to helpscounseling.com and work with Rebecca and her team. They're a wonderful bunch of people. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael, for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah. We'll have to do this again.
Okay.
And again, maybe. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening today. And I would like to invite everybody, please find that subscribe button. If you haven't already clicked on it, find it, click on it, and receive continued updates from us here at Depictions Media Radio and from this particular show, The Influencer Club. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.